Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today for this takeout to launch the 2019 Joint Response Plan for the Rohingya Humanitarian Crisis. I have the great honor and the pleasure to give the floor for an introductory remark to His Excellency, Mr. Shahryar Alam, Honorable State Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Government of Bangladesh. Mr.
Thank you. Dear friends, we are extremely grateful to UNHCR, the High Commissioner himself, the DG of IOM, and all concerned UN agencies for hosting this joint response plan for the third time. As you are probably aware that last year it was estimated that we'll be requiring in the tune of 954 million US dollars, and approximately 69% contributions were received from member countries and organizations and donors. This year, for the year of 2019, it is estimated that we'll be requiring 921 million US dollars. I express my gratitude to the member countries who participated this year's Joint Response Plan meeting. Approximately 30 countries and organizations spoke and commended Bangladesh's efforts to deal with the crisis and hosting over 1 million persecuted Rohingya nationals from Myanmar into Bangladesh. We have had specific pledges from countries and organizations, but we are pleased to gather that all of them are probably considering making an announcement in due course of time. However, as we appreciate your efforts and valuable contributions, the key is repatriation. And Bangladesh, with the help of UN agencies and some neighboring countries, is making efforts. We are into arrangement and we have signed agreement with Myanmar, but unfortunately the situation in Myanmar is still not conducive for a voluntary, safe and dignified return. So we urge upon the international community to put pressure on Myanmar and engage with them constructively, so as a responsible and responsive member of United Nations, they take their citizens back without further delays. However, till that point of time, Bangladesh, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, is doing everything possible. And so far, you are probably aware that we have allocated 6,500 acres of forest land. We have spent in the tune of 120 million US dollars. We have already spent $250 million to get one of our island prepared, ready to host up to 100,000 Rohingyas into the first phase of our efforts to relocate them, because the place where they're staying is vulnerable to heavy rain and cyclone. And this is one of the biggest worries that we had from 2018. We are soon approaching the monsoon and the cyclone season, and there are enough preparation that humanly possible with the help of international organizations and agencies. And I hope that will be enough for this year for a safe stay of the Rohingya people. I once again thank all of our member countries and UN organizations for hosting this year's event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable State Minister. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Filippo Grandi, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Thank you very much. I won't repeat what the Minister said, which is really the most important, but add the following. Let me recall what he said about 69% of last year's appeal being funded. That allowed us, with the government, under the government leadership, to achieve quite a lot, in particular to prepare, to equip the area inhabited by the refugees, which has very challenging living conditions, to withstand the pressure of the rainy season. And that was achieved last year, in addition to many other things that were done to support refugees and, to an extent, the host communities, thanks to the generous policy of open borders and providing people with refuge, afforded by the government of Bangladesh. This year, 920 million for both refugees and host communities. I think a total beneficiary population of 1.2, 1.3 million people. So a large program. I speak, for UNHCR, this remains one of the biggest priorities. Another monsoon season is upon us. It will be starting in, 2-3 months. So we need to accelerate work. Today, we heard pledges. I calculated, so I hope I can quote this, I calculated myself 132 million firmly pledged by several donors, but as the minister said, at least 4 or 5 other major donors saying we will pledge in the next few days and weeks. So I think this figure will quickly rise. And I think, for this type of exercise, having a result immediately like that is not bad. Is a sign, I hope, of continued support for a situation that unfortunately gets protracted. I echo very much the minister's point that the solution continues to be voluntary, dignified, safe repatriation to Myanmar. You all know that we've spoken about this many times with the press corps here. UNHCR and UNDP have a memorandum of understanding with the government of Myanmar. We've been able to do a bit of what was foreseen in the memorandum. We accessed some areas, we made assessment, we submitted a number of potential projects to the government of Myanmar. They approved some of them. The challenge has been, again, in the last few weeks, renewed insecurity in the north of Rakhine State, which in fact has provoked to a limited extent some further internal displacement, and much more importantly has prevented us from having that access that is necessary to carry out the activities that have been approved. And that is absolutely crucial if we want to carry out work to improve conditions, to help people make the decision to return. I want to just conclude by reminding everybody that what, in addition to that, needs to be done is action by the government to Bangladesh to respond to the recommendation of the Rakhine Advisory Commission, the so-called Kofi Annan Commission. Freedom of movement, access to jobs and services, a pathway to citizenship, a solution to the internal displacement. The list is very familiar to all. We need work on that, not just on development, in order to create conditions for people to go back. Otherwise, the trust that is needed for people that have suffered such big violence, such harsh violence, and conflict, that trust will not be rebuilt, and we will continue to remain with a very challenging situation in Bangladesh to have to support Bangladesh host such a huge population under extremely difficult conditions. So the appeal of today, and I hope you can echo our appeal for donors, is swift, flexible, quick contributions, substantive contributions to help us continue the work while the other dialogue is carried on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. And it's now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. António Vitorino, Director General of the International Organization for Migration.
Thank you so much. Well, let me first of all reiterate our tribute to the government and the people of Bangladesh for their generosity and solidarity in supporting the situation of the 1.2 million people from the Rohingya displaced from Myanmar, and reiterate our commitment in the close cooperation with the UNHCR and the other UN agencies in the field. Just 3 very brief remarks. The first one is to say that the biggest challenge is to address not only the basic needs of the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, but it's also to, at the same time, to address the impacts of the presence of the Rohingya displaced people in the host communities in Bangladesh. The two things go together, and definitely the appeal for the international community to support the action of the government of Bangladesh and of the international agencies, but also of the local NGOs, is precisely to guarantee that at the same time we address the needs of those who are displaced, but we minimize the impacts that those massive displacement of people has in the host communities. And as Commissioner Filippo Grandi has just said, we are encouraged by the reaction that today we found here from the international community. We just see it as a start, but it has been definitely a good start, and we hope that the needs for funding will be met during the year. My second remark is to say that, of course, we are committed to go on providing the necessary humanitarian assistance, but there are limits for humanitarian assistance. And the situation requires a sustainable, definite solution, and that will require political will. And to a large extent, the prospect that we all aim is to guarantee safe, dignified return of the Rohingya to the Rakhine region, and that lies to a large extent in the hands of the Myanmar authorities. So we appeal for the necessary political will to be mobilized so that a definite solution can be found. And last but not least, I think that the press is extremely important, because a protracted crisis tends to get out of the radar of the public opinion. So we are very much counting on you to keep this extraordinary, important humanitarian crisis in the focus of your own work, and therefore in the attention of the world as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General. I would like also to inform you that we have the pleasure to have here with us today Mrs. Mia Seppo, who is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh, and also Mr. Mahadi Muhammad, who is the Divisional Director of Action contre la faim, who is here to speak on behalf of the NGO platform. So now I would like to open the floor for questions. Please introduce yourself and let us know to whom you are asking the question. Tom?
Tom Miles from Reuters News Agency. I'd like to ask about recent or perhaps current new fighting in Myanmar, which seems to be displacing more people, and whether you think that we're in for another surge of refugees. And also I would like to ask, well, perhaps anybody who cares to comment, one of the heads of the UN agencies, perhaps to comment on an interview given yesterday by the head of the Myanmar military to a Japanese news outlet, in which he questioned the whole basis, it seems, of what we see as the Rohingya refugee crisis, saying there's no certain proof and perhaps people were leaving to visit relatives and rejecting the criticism. I mean, how can you be talking to a government about returns when they seem to have a fundamentally different understanding of what's going on? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Who would like to take a few? No, normally it's just one. Please. Minister.
Just to answer to your first question, yes, there are credible reports that the Tatmadaw is now fighting Arakan army. Since the problem erupted 2 years ago, when it was blamed to ARSA, obviously there were probably some truths, but ARSA was never a force that we were aware of. We knew historically Arakan army is equipped, so it's a real fight this time as far as we are concerned. And we have already seen 200 individuals, and this time they are not Muslim, they are Buddhist, who crossed the border and took shelter near the zero line area between Myanmar and Bangladesh border. So we don't have detailed information because, as you know, it's very difficult to extract information, even for you as journalists. And I can only comment that this has worsened the situation and further doubt on any immediate repatriation. But we are watchful and careful. Our border guards are in full alert, even though we have allowed these 200 people to cross the border to some extent, and they are physically sheltering at the zero line area. But this is something that Myanmar needs to address. But however, this shouldn't be used as an excuse of delaying the repatriation further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Mr. Grandi.
Yes, just to add to what the minister said, we have also learned, because access is very limited there, of some limited internal displacement inside Myanmar caused by this latest insecurity, but we're talking about a few thousand people, so relatively small compared to the bigger problem. And this is a completely different dynamic. These are not the Rohingya people being displaced, but other people. But since it is in a neighboring or even similar overlapping area, of course, the risk is always there that it complicates matter further. So we hope that this problem will decrease as a matter of urgency. What we are also worried, let me say it again, is that this insecurity in northern Rakhine affects our access and our ability to implement even the small activities that we have already agreed upon with the government of Myanmar. So one more reason to hope that this insecurity ends. And on the other question, I am not familiar with this particular interview. All I can say is that the government of Myanmar has signed last summer, as I said, in MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with the United Nations. In that, the terms of the question are very clear, spelled out. That there has been violence, that people have fled across the border into Bangladesh, that it is their right to return to their homes, to their, many times there's separation of people, they've left other people behind. So it is their right, like for any refugee situation, to go back. So that's all recognized, but there needs to be work done that has not been done yet to create those conditions. So if some people among our interlocutors have different views, we stick by the letter of that Memorandum of Understanding, which recognizes these problems and indicates precisely what solutions need to be carried out in order to create those conditions. We will continue to engage.
Thank you very much. Laurent, Swiss News Agency. We have only one, sorry.
Yeah, questions to the same people. First, Foreign Minister. Could you tell us today that the government of Bangladesh will not set up in the next months any repatriation operation as long as the conditions are not conducive to that? Because there was that attempt a few months ago that was at the end cancelled because no one also showed up among the refugees. So could you confirm that there won't be any operation? And then for the High Commissioner, could you give us a sense of the projects that were agreed by the government? And would you say that there might be an intent by Tatmadaw to instrumentalize the fightings in order to postpone the commitment of the government according to the MOU?
Well, may I just remind you that the attempt made on the 15th November 2018 of possible repatriation from the 2,000 individuals that were cleared by Myanmar authority was in line with the arrangements we have signed with them, was in line with whatever we have agreed with UN agencies. But when the day came on the voluntariness, people refused to go. But prior to that, we made every possible effort. Our foreign minister went to Myanmar to see things for himself, the villages where they were dislocated from, that the promises Myanmar made, whether those are actually delivered or not. So we were reasonably convinced that the situation is favorable for a possible repatriation. But as far as the new efforts are concerned, obviously we are in discussion with Myanmar. There are some works needs to be done, but the majority of that involves counseling and giving people the confidence that if they go back, the situation that they will face is not similar, anywhere near similar to what when they left. So we'll have to be reasonably convinced before we make fresh effort of repatriation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
High Commissioner.
The type of projects that have been designed are essentially developmental projects, small-scale developmental projects in villages of origin of the people who have left. And they are designed in a manner that promotes, to the extent that it is possible, peaceful coexistence, because that's the key challenge there. And, you know, I visited northern Rakhine before the August 2017 events, in fact, in July 2017. And that was the most striking features were this discrimination against this community, but also the very tense relationships between the communities. So we are arguing, and in fact this is, by the way, one of the conclusions of the Kofi Annan recommendation. We're arguing that any work that is carried out to bring development to that area, which needs it badly, it's the second poorest state in the Federation of Myanmar, any work there needs to be designed in a manner that includes both and benefits both communities, because that is one contribution to foster coexistence. So that's the type of project. Now, your second question was about, you know, do we attribute second motives or ulterior motives? No, that's not what I said. We know that there is a situation of insecurity that makes access to northern Rakhine dangerous at the moment. We just hope that it will be addressed quickly so that that access can be resumed.
Voice of America? Lisa? I come to you.
Sounds forbidding. I would like to have pose my question to, is it Mr. Mohammed, who is you represent the NGOs, is that right? Yeah, I'd like to get a different perspective on this situation, if I may, and find out actually what your work is, whether I don't know how many NGOs are represented, but whether you're working with both the Rohingya refugees and also with the host communities. And I'd like to know what your major challenges are, whether there's a kind of hostility growing between the two communities, because, and as you all mentioned, and it's absolutely true, there is so much generosity on the part of the government of Bangladesh and the host community, and yet they are people, and there's a lot of pressure upon them. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So I'm Mahadi Muhammad, representing the NGO platform, though I'm working at Action Against Hunger, or Action Country Lafa. Yes, the first question is, there are nearly 104 NGOs we are registered together, and we are forming an NGO platform. So I'm representing for this NGO platform over here. So NGO platform is the platform for all the NGOs who are working at Cox's Bazar for this humanitarian response. The challenges, we face lots of challenges. It's normal for any kinds of humanitarian intervention. NGOs, wherever we go, we face challenges. So over there, we face some challenges in terms of, like having quick permissions and having quick access to the locations. But I think gradually we are working on this topic, and also Bangladesh government is we are very thankful to Bangladesh government. They're helping us a lot in terms of having permissions quickly, and as well as what you saw a few days before, maybe some tensions in between the host and the Rohingya community, which is also we all are concerned about it, and also the government of Bangladesh, they're helping us out, and they're also, and we all are working for better cohesions at the at the community level.
Sorry, on the tensions, how do you go about easing the tensions? I mean, what sort of activities do you do? Is there kind of relationships that you have between the two communities?
So what we do, we have some social cohesion programs, like we have activities both at host community and as well as Rohingya community. So most of there is 44 INGO we register on this GRP 2019 for our needs. And as well as there are a lot of NGOs, like national NGOs are also registered ourselves over here for this GRP. So what I can say that over there we have most of the programs we have not only for the Rohingya community, but also for the Bangladeshi community who are affected due to this Rohingya crisis. So by the whenever we go for any kinds of program implementation, we focus on the vulnerability, not the, like the ethnicity, either is Rohingya or the Bangladeshi or who. We always focus on the vulnerability.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up, so I would like to thank very much all our speakers, the Honorable State Minister, sorry, the High Commissioner for Refugees, the Director General of IOM, Mrs. Seppo, and Mr. Mohammed, to be here today with us. Please relay this pledge, this request. It's very important for us. Thank you very much to everybody.